Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to Abnormal Voyages. My name is David, and today we find ourselves in Tucson, Arizona, at the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum. This museum specializes in showing us not only the wonderful landscapes of the desert, but all the creatures that call it home. So tag along, and let's see what we can discover.
We're going to a place that you've never heard of before. It's Abnormal Voyages. You're gonna learn something new. We're gonna open new doors. It's Abnormal Voyages.
Unlike other museums or zoos similar to this, the Desert Sonora Museum never lets you forget that you are in the desert. Natural wonders are all around you. This is actually a beehive because, of course, they are very important to the ecosystem. And as you looked around, you could actually see the bees buzzing about and going through their daily motions of collecting nectar to pollinate. There was nothing to be scared of either, as these bees did not sting. They were single moms with families to feed. At least that's what the sign said here. And bees were far from the only insects you could find, as there was also beautiful butterflies everywhere you looked here in the desert.
Now we're going to visit some feathery friends in the hummingbird aviary.
Hummingbirds are amazing little creatures and some of the most unique birds out there. There's actually over 330 different types of hummingbirds in the Americas alone. Not only are hummingbirds the only birds capable of flying backwards, but they're so tiny that they usually weigh less than an average nickel. Incredibly, the size of a hummingbird egg is about the size of a jelly bean, which makes sense considering how tiny even full adults end up being. These guys can be a little hard to pin down in one place, but they sure are pretty. The average lifespan of a hummingbird is only about 5 years, though some have been known to more than double that and live to 10 to 12 years sometimes. Hummingbirds are also migratory birds and sometimes will fly 4,000 to 5,000 miles all alone. But we now leave our feathery friends and move on to another section of the desert.
The desert is home to several reptiles and invertebrates, and they're all inside this here. Let's go see them.
Lots of different reptiles are very at home in the desert. Being able to bask out on the rock and get that warm sun is fantastic for so many of these cold-blooded guys. Of course, for most snakes, it is better to run into these guys here at a museum or a zoo as opposed to out in the wild. You'd never want to be putting your shoe on and suddenly this guy slithers out of it. That would probably be a pretty bad day for you. Of course, being cold-blooded, they weren't very active. They were resting and gathering up their strength. But when they want to be, they can certainly move. The desert provides plenty of little hideaways for them, so it's easy to get a nice place to rest. But snakes aren't the only things out there. This was the lifespan of everybody's favorite amphibian, the frog. And here's a frog now. Very happy to just be relaxing in his little pool of water. Water is pretty scarce in the desert at times, so when amphibians find it, they love to stay there. The bright green does a fantastic job of blending them in with their environment as well. These guys camouflage perfectly in with the plants.
something that some people don't know about scorpions is that they glow under ultraviolet light. So check this out. You don't really see anything now, but as soon as you hold the light, there he is, all glowing, and looks like he's going to come say hi to us.
Bugs and snakes make sense for the desert, but sometimes there's creatures you don't think of.
Water may not be what comes to mind when you think of the desert, but they have a nice little section dedicated to our fishy friends.
Water is certainly few and far between in the desert, but where there is water, it is teeming with life, with all sorts of little aquatic friends, such as these gorgeous seahorses, who love nothing more than to swim around and play all throughout the day. Even in areas where water is scarce, it's an extremely important part of the entire ecosystem in any biome. As you may have guessed, this was a pretty small section of the museum, but I'm glad that they didn't leave it out. It gives people a chance to learn a little bit more about what's out there. These eels were all waving goodbye to us as we headed out back into the desert. There was actually some other examples of water as well, such as this exhibit here, where you can't see much.
We're going to head down this tunnel to get another perspective of the water. This viewing area is actually under the surface, so we can look at the fish a little better.
There we go. A much better angle, and easier to see these fish, and closer to what would be their natural habitat. Very pretty. But what about the land animals? The desert is certainly home to things that don't slither around or fly in the sky. Well, for most of the hot day, they tend to find nap spaces. Good places to just be cool and take a snooze. See? Naps are very, very popular. Everybody wants to take a little siesta in that hot sun. These javelina wild pigs were napping, but it looks like somebody in their family was not on board with nap time. He was trying his best to wake his parents up so they could go play and have fun. The parents were not having it, though. I think they've learned how to ignore him. I thought it was very interesting that even the land animals tended to have great camouflage, and if you didn't know where to look, it could sometimes be a little tough to actually point out the different creatures. Somebody who was definitely not interested in napping at the moment were the coyotes. These guys were very active, very aware of their surroundings and exploring, looking around, seeing what new things were coming up to their habitat. They look like they'd be fun to pet, but you never know with wild dogs. And just because they're not napping, it doesn't mean you can't take a break every now and then, resting on top of some rocks over here, just enjoying being one of the top creatures in the desert food chain. When it comes to the heat, there's of course other ways to get out of it. For smaller creatures, it's very easy to find big rock alcoves and wedge yourself in there, like these next guys.
Of course, something the desert is well known for is scorpions, but they tend to be a little hidden, so we move this rock and we might... Oh yeah, there we go. There's a scorpion right there. Definitely don't want to end up with one of these guys in your shoe.
Lots of bugs enjoy the crevices of rocks. This was the molted skin of a big desert tarantula. I'm alright never seeing that guy in person. And surprisingly, we found an entire party of frogs. These guys were up on the rock just chilling, having a nice little mixer maybe, getting to know each other. Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen this many frogs in one place before. But our desert voyage continued as we found a new animal that actually decided to go underground to keep cool.
One of the cuddlier citizens of the desert, the Blacktailed Prairie Dog.
These guys are absolutely adorable. I know we found some in the wild in New Mexico, but these are black-tailed prairie dogs, so they're a little different from the ones out there. These guys lived in colonies together. They have an entire intricate system of tunnels throughout this entire section, and it allows them to pop in and out to get wherever they want without having to expose themselves to predators or that hot, hot sun. This one is actually a sentry, and it's his job to warn everybody else if any hawks fly overhead or any of those coyotes start coming around. Keep up the good work, buddy.
With the hot desert sun overhead, some animals prefer the cool caves. Let's get in there and see who's home.
Of course, bats tend to be the most famous cave animal, but these caves can be used as a refuge by animals of all sorts. These are examples of things that have been found in caves. Toads like to live in there. There's been people actually who've used caves, of course. And then this was the remains of a giant sloth. They used to come in here and just relax. Makes sense for a sloth, I think. And some of the most beautiful things you can find in the caves, these gorgeous examples of rocks and crystals. Very stunning.
As you can see, the desert is a vast, wonderful, beautiful landscape that rightfully deserves to be preserved. My name is David, and this has been Abnormal Voyages. Thanks for tagging along. We'll see you in the next one.